Welcome to The Hump with Katie Thiroux. I'm your host, Katie Thiroux, and I'm bringing you interviews with some incredible artists, finding out why are they so amazing, how did it all happen, and what can we learn from their journey. Before we get started today, I'd like to thank our sponsors. And first up, we have Colstein's. Colstein's is my most favorite string shop to visit in the entire world. They're based in Long Island, New York, and anytime I'm in New York City, I make a special trip to Colstein's to see what new things they have going on. They do everything from instrument repair to building instruments. They make beautiful double basses. They make their own strings, their own rosin, and actually they sell the world's most comfortable face mask. And hey, if you're ever in the area, you should make a special trip yourself because it's like going to the Disneyland of double bass world. It's so much fun. If you go to Colstein.com and use the promo code KATIE10, KATIE10, you'll get 10% off your entire online purchase. Or just give them a call and you'll get 10% off as well. So that's Colstein.com. Next up, we have Jam's World, the clothing company based in Honolulu, Hawaii, family owned and operated since 1964. Y'all know how much I love Jam's World. Of course, I've got my Jam's World on right now. It's made from 100% spun crushed rayon, and that's why it keeps you really cool and comfortable. And it's like such amazing artwork. I absolutely love it. If you go to jamsworld.com and use the promo code JAZZ15, JAZZ15, you'll get 15% off your entire online purchase. And last but not least, we have discoverdoublebass.com. This is just an incredible online resource for bass players. They have a ton of free lessons on their website and on YouTube. Go give them a look. That's discoverdoublebass.com. All right, the time has come to bring you our guest today, the incredible bassist Larry Grenadier. I had so much fun talking to him. He is so sweet, so kind, so personable. I call him the humble man. His career has spanned over 3 decades, from Stan Getz to Joe Henderson, Betty Carter, Pat Metheny, John Schofield, Brad Mehldau, Kurt Rosenwinkel. You all know what a great bass player he is. Now find out what a great person he is. Without further ado, here's Larry Grenadier.
Hi there.
Hey, Larry.
Hey. Coming. Hey.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you good.
Okay, that's how every interview starts. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Right. That's where we're at.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is interesting because I really haven't used Skype in probably 5 years or something, but it seems to be as good as anything else.
Yeah, you know, for a bass player like me, there's just one button I have to press and I'm good to go.
Right. We're still very analog people.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to join us on The Hump. I'm having a lot of fun talking to wonderful bass players like yourself. So
great. So it's just bass.
You know, for now it's just bass, but you know, every art form has a hump, you know, like you can be a chef and have a hump or something. So I'm going to slowly like sprinkle in some of my other favorite musicians and friends like Ken Peplowski and other people who are like other types of musicians. And then I have friends who are chefs or artists. So get into some of that.
See how it's all related somehow.
Exactly. It is.
Yeah.
Well,
great.
thank
Well,
you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just get right into it. I'll start right at the beginning because I'm kind of excited. We have one similarity for sure that I'll get to, but how did you come to the bass? I know you started with trumpet and you grew up in a musical family, but I feel like when people play bass, it's for one of two reasons. Like they showed up to concert band late and they're the last one and they have to play that thing in the corner, or they really loved it. So how did you come about?
Yeah, I was just fortunate in that my father, who played trumpet, thought that it would make sense that if he got me a bass guitar, that I could play with my middle brother who played guitar at the time, and my oldest brother who played trumpet and plays trumpet still. But that together we could play as a band. I mean, he could have brought home a drum set or a piano or something, but I don't really, it was one of those things that just kind of happened. And, at that age, you don't really second guess things so much. You just take it in and either it settles in and you really enjoy it, you keep doing it, or you kind of give it up really quickly. And I never even really thought about it because, the great thing I love about music from the beginning was its social part, the interactive part, and that we could play as a band, we could play with our friends from school, we could enjoy that time together, whether it was at lunch or after school or on weekends. and also that I was doing gigs right away because I joined a band like maybe the next week or something.
Everyone needs a bass player.
Right, which is unique to bass, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so that allowed me to see not only that I could make a little bit of money, but that it was just kind of a fun thing to do, And so I really never thought about it after that, and just kind of continued to do it. He never really had to ask me to practice because I just would normally. Well, he was smart in that he got me a teacher right away. I already knew how to read music because of playing trumpet, but that really helped just to learn the instrument. This is electric bass, and and then he liked jazz, and my brothers listened to jazz already, so. Even though I was into pop music at that time, I was starting to hear jazz. I was starting to hear the double bass on these records, and I remember even going to my electric bass teacher and saying, "What is this upright bass thing I'm hearing?" And he played a little bit too, so he kind of turned me on. But then I borrowed one from school and started taking lessons with a jazz bass player, but he taught me some mandol and like the classical thing. So that transition just kind of through the music I was listening to, how that evolved, the instrument evolved for me into double bass. And then I was also lucky to see Ray Brown when I was still playing electric bass. He was playing nearby where I lived, and sitting probably 10 feet from him and seeing that was a big, huge blast of inspiration.
I see. That's one of our similarity, Larry. I saw Ray Brown when I was 12 years old as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It was in Oakland, and I was there with my dad for some family thing, and we just looked in the paper, and Ray Brown was playing, and I already played bass, and it was the trio, and Phil Woods was a guest, and it was just that, that moment, probably like you had too, like, what is this? What's happening? Right.
I mean, not understanding it on any intellectual level,
No.
Purely emotional. And yeah, I remember also that I had to go to the bathroom really bad. I had to pee really bad, and I didn't want to get up in the middle of it. So I remember those type of things. But I also remember just like the power of his presence and the beautiful instrument. And I remember some of the tunes even. I remember him playing Round Midnight with the bow, and but yeah, it was just kind of one of those things that kind of washed over me. And then I was still playing electric bass at that time, but it kind of pushed me towards listening. I bought some of his records. So I think, as my listening evolved more into more, kind of straight ahead bebop, jazz, the electric bass slowly kind of went to the corner more often. Yeah.
Well, that's such a cool thing when you grow up playing music at a young age with other people that are in and around your own age. It's kind of like you said, it's like a social activity. It's something fun.
Right.
And it's like a boost of confidence too, because you guys are like doing this thing. No one else is doing it, and you guys are doing it.
Right. I remember actually I was in 5th grade because my brother was in 6th grade, and we played at like a school assembly, and I don't even remember what we played, some cover tune, and then I remember finishing and a kid coming up to me and saying, "Oh, my dad said you guys were just faking it. You were playing along with the record." I was like, that was so cool. It's like, no, we weren't. And so, like these little things keep you moving through it. And it's funny, because I still feel that way about music. To me, so much of it is a social, so much of what I love about it is the social aspects of it, of being with my friends that I really enjoy being with, and sharing music with them, and sharing the times before the gig and after the gig, and traveling around and all that. It's funny how those things really maintain their importance over 40 years.
Yeah, that's so cool. So you grew up in the Bay Area, right?
Mm-hmm. I was born in San Francisco, and we moved to a town called Burlingame, which is in the peninsula. So yeah.
And you were already, well, how much were you said you liked to practice, but like how much were you practicing in your formative years, would you say?
Right. Yeah, this comes up a lot now with teaching, and people are always asking me, how much should I practice? And
not should you practice, but how much were you doing it?
Right. But well, like in high school,
yeah,
you mean? Like,
yeah.
don't know, probably maybe a couple hours a day.
Hmm.
I wasn't doing like 8 hours
Yeah.
that thing, I mean, every once in a while probably, but I was doing a lot of gigs already in high school.
Hmm.
So I was always balancing the practicing with the playing, learning how to play through people who were doing it much better than I was.
Hmm.
And that's why I was just super lucky in having, those experiences, because I think if I hadn't had those experiences and just learned it through a teacher and practicing in my room, I mean, who knows? I mean, I think definitely my progress would have been a lot slower,
Hmm.
and whether I would have got to anything, actually, I don't know. I really, especially for jazz, so much of what we accomplish is through that close interaction with master musicians.
Hmm.
And the sooner that you can have that, it's a real blessing. So even in high school, I was starting to get some of those experiences, and then when I went to college, I stayed in the area. I went to Stanford and continued to play around the San Francisco, and that just kind of just kept on getting even better because there were so many great
Hmm.
musicians at that time living around.
Yeah, and sometimes not that it's better or worse, but I feel like some people think, oh, you because you grew up in San Francisco, or there's San Francisco, LA, New York, like places where there's a lot of
Hmm.
musicians. But I feel like every city has their enclave of, jazz musicians. So you could still be
Right.
learning from these older people who have done it. It doesn't matter where
Absolutely.
you are.
Absolutely. And I mean, back before my time, but where things were more regional, and there was kind of a sound to a certain area.
Yeah.
I think this is really cool. And maybe there's a bit of that still when I was, growing up in the '80s. Thinking back about it, there might be some similarities between those of us who grew up. I mean, I think that actually is true. I mean, I think about well, like there was Jeff Ballard, who I continue to play with. We played a lot college age
Hmm.
time, and I think not only because we were hanging together, but it's like listening to similar music, and seeing a lot of the same gigs of people coming through town.
Hmm.
Somehow, really, plant seeds of influence and
Yeah.
that have lasting value. And so I think that's probably still the case. But yeah, no matter where you are, there are always people who do what you do better,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you just kind of just soak all that up as much as possible. And also that generation that I was around, that was when I was, say, a teenager, they were 40s, 50s,
Hmm.
60s, 70s. Um, they were definitely of that era that didn't talk so much about the mechanicals of making music. It
Yeah.
was very encoded, or it was everything was implied through the music.
Hmm.
Every once in a while they might say something very specific, but like no,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so to learn that way too, I think is really valuable, because
Hmm.
it ends up going deeper, because you have to figure out the information yourself. They pass it along, but it's encrypted a bit.
Yeah.
So it's not so easy. It's not like you go to a music school and they say, well, you do this, you do this, and do this, and you're kind of cool. Back then, it's like, well, am I cool? I'm not sure
Yeah.
if I really, and then when you see them smile, they relax, or whatever it is, they say, oh yeah, this must be more in the direction of what they want from the bass. And I think that was super valuable to kind of have that kind of more older school education of it.
Yeah, and I kind of hope that that makes a resurgence because I feel so lucky. I grew up in Los Angeles, still at the time
Mm,
when there was multiple things happening every night, and if you showed up, you'd be expected to sit in and play with the older people, and it's like you'd either get your
right.
butt kicked, which would be great. It'd be great either way because then you'd go, I need to go home and learn this tune, or I played a wrong change or something, and
Yes.
I benefited so much more from doing that than anything, I think.
Yeah, it's for sure, and I really try to keep that in mind when I teach, because if you are bringing this into um, a scholastic environment, there's got to be ways to somehow maintain a bit of that,
Hmm.
of not give away all the answers. Let them figure it out through their own process. I think it's super important.
Yeah. Um, so you said you went to Stanford for English Lit, and you're working at the same time. You were able to
Hmm.
keep up with your degree and do it all.
Yeah, kind of. I
No
mean,
big
it
deal.
took me an extra year. It took me an extra year.
Okay.
It took, 5 years. I took a semester off once because I went on the road, but yeah. Um, yeah, it was tricky. I mean, back then, it's what you just kind of do what you have to do. And
Hmm.
I have the only regret actually for me was that I didn't fully take advantage of what I could have at school as far as academic,
Hmm.
education. I mean, I didn't cruise, but at some points at the end, I was kind of like, okay, let me just finish this up and get out of here.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing. But and also, talking about practicing, I I didn't have unlimited time to practice during
Hmm.
that time, because of school and the academic challenges. So, I had to figure out how to deal with 1 hour, maybe 2 hours
Hmm.
of time to practice. And so I think that was good too.
Yeah.
It made me figure out how to use my time the best, not waste time on doing stuff I already kind of knew how to do. And then I continued to have these great musical experiences from other people, and
Hmm.
that kind of kept it all moving forward and
Yeah.
kept my progression happening. I didn't get stalemated by academic life.
Hmm. Yeah. Which is easy to happen for that.
Right.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So that really, I think really the thing was how lucky I was to have these experiences playing with great musicians.
And speaking of great musicians, that's where you met Stan Getz at Stanford.
I had met him a little bit before. He kind of helped me to get into Stanford because he was the artist in residence at
Hmm.
that time. Yeah, so he was there, and I mean he wasn't he wasn't actually there, but I was able to play with him a bit during that time,
Hmm.
and Joe Henderson quite a bit
Mm.
around that same time,
Wow.
who had come to school to do a gig, and I played with him, and um, he just called me to start playing with him around San Francisco. We kind of played maybe once or twice a month at this regular gig, and I wasn't touring. I was really just kind of doing local gigs, but the local gigs were really good
Yeah.
because it was, he was there, Bobby Hutcherson was there,
Hmm.
and then also people were just coming through town every week.
Yeah.
Back then when they just used the local rhythm
Yeah.
section, and there's very little of that nowadays
Hmm.
for people to experience. But then it was still there, and there were a couple big clubs, Kimball's and Yoshi's, and um, a place called Garden City down in San Jose, and you could play a week with a great, like unbelievable, like I mean, even like some, like Anita O'Day
Hmm.
or I don't
Wow.
know, just Toots Thielmans. I mean, there's a really wide variety. Johnny Griffin. So I had those experiences, without really being ready for them.
Hmm.
Not really knowing that many tunes yet,
Yeah.
and learning them kind of as quickly as I could, which was a great experience, as hard as that was
Yeah.
to somebody calling a tune and not even having heard of it,
Yes. Yeah.
and they didn't really care if you knew it or not. You just
Hmm.
count it off
It
and
was
go,
part of their
and
set.
let's
Yeah.
yeah, and first night and kind of get a sense of it, and from then hopefully the next night would be better.
Hmm.
It's really unusual to have that experience so young.
Yeah. And back then, when you were around people like Joe Henderson and Stan Getz, were they encouraging of you going to play music, or were they kind of like, sometimes you meet older musicians and they're like, you better study science, or stay away
Hmm.
from this thing, right?
That's interesting because I don't actually remember them saying either way. I mean, there was
Hmm.
definitely no like negative about like don't do this.
Hmm.
Why would you want to do this? I didn't get any of that except from my parents.
Yes. Yeah.
But let's see. I mean, they were encouraging in the sense that they seemed to most of the time be happy after the gig, or they'd call me for another gig.
Yeah.
Which is I guess the best thing that could happen. I mean, I had some early traumatic experiences of like being on the bandstand and somebody calling a tune and not knowing it and just totally messing it up, and
Yeah.
them turning around and giving me like the look of death, and, and that's part of the learning thing,
Yeah.
and that's another thing that you're not going to probably get in a school setting. So that was the one thing, when I graduated high school, was, do I want to go to a music school? Do I want to go to New York or go to Berklee or whatever? So that was an option, but I kind of sensed that I was getting a lot of musical education by being home and playing gigs around town.
Yeah, totally viable. It worked out well, Larry.
Yeah, it worked out.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some things, I have some holes that I've noticed over the years, though, that I would have probably filled by a music education right out of high school. Everything for me is very pragmatic. It's like, what do I have to do to make sure that I can do the gig cool, that I know the instrument well enough, I can play, all the fundamental things, but certain things like piano playing and arranging, I said, just really, it's like not even a YouTube education. It's whatever, pre-YouTube, non-professional education. So but that to me was the kind of the only drawback, because I was still taking classical lessons in college. So I was kind of continuing my classical development.
That's an ongoing process.
No doubt, but it's beautiful. I love having both to be motivational, because some days, I mean, it's really interesting now during this isolation of staying inspired, and some days I'll wake up and want to play Bach, and that's like the perfect start to my musical day, and I just love playing through the cello suites and continue to be just overwhelmed by how beautiful they are and how hip they are. But some days I just don't feel like doing that, and some days I just want to play along with a record.
Yeah.
So like lately I've been doing that the last 3 days. Before that, probably the last week, I was kind of playing Bach every day. And so it's like I have these options, and they're all can be inspiration on a certain day.
Yeah.
So, it's rare that I don't feel like doing anything.
Yeah, and it's nice that you don't have to do any of that. It's because you really want to do it.
That's true. I mean, I guess I do. I mean, there's always this, well, like you lose your callus after a while and stuff like this, like, I just don't want this time to be totally wasted. It's such a unique moment, and, we're just like, with not knowing how long this is going to last. I think it's for our own kind of mental health too, of staying connected to the instrument, staying connected to music. It's really necessary part for me of feeling good.
Do you think from this time we'll get a Gleaners part 2?
Well, there's time for me to be writing that stuff. I mean, I really don't want to do. I didn't want to do another solo record, really. I mean, I kind of felt like, okay, that's that. Something next, But I'm kind of building up material where I could probably do another one, but we'll see. I'm not sure. I'm really, everything right now, I'm really just kind of doing it for myself.
Oh, that's so nice.
So, yeah, I mean, I have the time, and it's like we're always in different time periods. Like my son is 14, he's in school again. It's like, I do have time to practice all day, actually, if I want to. Not that I do, but there's that freedom to do whatever I kind of want.
Yeah,
which is nice.
I fast forwarded a little bit, jumping to the Gleaners, so I'm going to go back. So you made your way to Boston via Gary Burton, playing with him.
Exactly.
And I mean, what was it like playing with Stan Getz and Joe Henderson? But you were in Gary Burton's group for a while, right?
For a year. Yeah, I knew the saxophone player, Donnie McCaslin. He grew up in Santa Cruz, and we knew each other in high school. So he had gone to Berklee and joined Gary's band a few years before. And just kind of timing was right. I just graduated school, and I was thinking about moving to New York. And he called and said that there was slot open in the band. And so I went out to Boston and auditioned, and I got the gig and just moved out there in January 1990. And played with Geri for really just about a year, and then moved to New York in 91.
And in that year, like in 1990, were you guys traveling the world at that point?
Yeah, that was the first time I went to Europe. Did we go to Japan? Maybe we didn't go to Japan that time, but it was the first time I'd gone to Europe, and we did tour constantly because Geri was still connected to Berklee at that time, so he had some responsibilities. But we had toured more than I ever had. That's for sure. I had done a little bit of touring before that, but just in the States. And so that was great to be able to experience that, and also, so then I moved to New York, and I still kind of kept Geri's gig for another couple months. So I moved to New York with a gig, which was really nice, because I had some money in my pocket. And but Geri was great. I mean, it was, he's a great leader, and he knows how to run a band. And, it's just the ability to play with somebody who kind of makes music so easily, and so consistently perfect. It's really striking.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And when you were touring in Europe at that time, just a bass question, were you traveling with your bass, or were you using basses around?
Oh no, I was bringing my bass. I mean, I was bringing my bass for a very long time, kind of up and through, let's say, mid 2000s, and then post 9/11, when it started to get harder, and then it just continued to be hard. And then for about maybe 4 or 5 years, I stopped. I was borrowing instruments everywhere. And then I got a travel bass, with the neck comes off, and start bringing. So I still really bring my bass as much as I can. It's funny, because I meet a lot of young bass players who've never brought their bass on the road. And it's to me, it's really an unfortunate, change, because there's something fun about trying different basses on the road when they're happening, but most of the time they kind of are set up really poorly. And the other thing is that, we're all going on the road to play. That's the only reason we're going on the road. And that's like that 1 hour, 2 hours of our whole day. And if that's spent on either a subpar instrument, or we're just like half the gig, we're trying to get used to it or whatever, it's unfortunate. And then you can't practice during the day. There's a lot of negatives to it. So I'm really happy with, with the neck off bass, because it's like, it's kind of a little bit of a hassle, getting to the airport and check, but they always take it. You have to sometimes pay for it, but it's never unbelievable amount of money. And then I just have my instrument with me all day.
Yeah.
It's really, I like that extra bit of work, because on the bandstand, it always pays off.
Yeah, it just makes it that much easier. It's you.
Yeah.
And then you have such a beautiful tone, and I'm sure you hear this all the time, Larry. I mean, beautiful tone, wonderful, like excellent intonation. And the first time I saw you, it was amazing, because you had the monitor up by your head, and I saw that, and I was like, oh, that makes complete sense, because that's where you hear sound. I'm not on the floor, right? So
exactly.
When did you come up with that? And also, do you use, I'm nerding out for a second, but do you use just a mic in front of the bass, or are you using a pickup?
So the thing with the speaker up by the ear, that was really through Ron Carter, who I was taking some lessons with back, see, when would this have been? Early 2000s. Who I had always wanted to take lessons with him. I'd been in New York for already at least 10 years, and I just kind of was scared to, I guess, but I finally got up the nerve and called him, and I was so thankful, because it was like unbelievable experience. But one lesson I remember we're talking about, he kind of had set up his situation where he has a speaker up high, ear height, and it just kind of resonated with me of the clarity of the information,
Mm-hmm.
even though the way I do it is different than him, the idea of having the speaker so close to your ear,
Mm-hmm.
I was able to hear the intonation better. It was just, I mean, there's something about the speaker on the floor which can be appealing in its depth. You get some of this
Yeah.
lower frequency that can feel kind of good, but I notice sometimes people's intonation is the issue is really they're not hearing the center of their pitch
Mm.
so clearly enough.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not always that, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, especially in a live gig.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured out how to do it my own way, based on Ron, but yeah, I kind of continued that ever since. And as far like I typically, yeah, through that speaker, which is like a powered monitor,
Mm-hmm.
I have a mic going through it,
Okay.
and that mic is running through a preamp into the speaker,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's kind of like having my own PA.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
I don't have to look to the monitor guy to say, "Can I have some more?" or whatever,
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really ends up being much easier, and I think most of the time it's good for the band in that it spreads the sound out for everybody's ears a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more. So I don't really have to have it as loud. It's clearer at a softer volume. Um, for certain gigs, I'll use a pickup, but usually that I'll put through an amp.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be down below because the powered monitor doesn't sound so good with most pickups.
Yeah.
Some pickups, actually, some of these more, some of the European ones, Schertler, and they're kind of made for full range speakers, so
Yeah.
they can sound okay. But usually, what I'm looking for, like I can turn the mic up very loud actually with no feedback because it's a good mic, good preamp.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I'll miss the low end that a mic just can't get.
Mm-hmm.
So a pickup, just a kind of any pickup,
Yeah.
really. I mean, I'm not really that particular. That through an amp will give me that low end that kind of fills out the spectrum.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a mic user myself.
It always depends on the band, though, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it does.
I'm not I wouldn't say I'm not a traditionalist, and
Mm-hmm.
in the negative sense of the term, but I've always appreciated how a mic comes closest to the sound that we hear naturally, and that the lengths of the notes are truer.
Mm-hmm.
And that was always the thing with pickups that affected me negatively, was that either the pickup was somehow gating the length of the
Mm-hmm.
note, or it was artificially long.
Yeah.
So you have to compensate for that, which is what people do, and it's okay. But Mike seems to me to get closest. But if a mic's not cutting it, I'm not going to just use a mic just because it sounds great to my ear.
Yeah.
I want everybody to have what they need. I want people out in the audience to hear it.
Yeah,
too.
you don't want the music to suffer either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to think about the audience in that sense too. Like, is it translating
Mm-hmm.
to and then if you're playing outside, it's another deal. So, typically, like even with Brad, which we play kind of quiet, typically, our sound guy will have both signals. I'll
Mm-hmm.
give him a pickup signal as well. I won't be hearing it on stage because I don't really need to, but for the audience, if he feels like a little bit, if it's needed, then he has it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Just nerding out.
I loved it. I mean, it's great. I love talking about it. I'm always dreaming of waking up and somebody's come up with a whole new concept of what pickups are or what speakers are.
Yeah.
I think we're so, I mean, pickup wise, I mean, they're slightly better than they were maybe when I was growing up, but maybe not in some ways. And speakers, they're the same since, I don't know, 100 years or so.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, how slow that process is for something new to come around.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you mentioned Brad Mehldau, and you're in such a unique, wonderful position to have been in, single band playing for how long is it now?
25 years.
Yeah, that's pretty unbelievable in today's standards.
Definitely.
I mean, just real short, like, how did it come about, you meeting Brad, and what was like was it a memorable experience playing together for the first time?
Yes.
Okay.
we met. I had met Jorge Rossi in Boston. He was going to Berklee as a trumpet student, actually, but he was already a great drummer. And so we used to play a bit in Boston. Actually, we used to play with Josh Redman in Boston. That's, I think, I first started playing with Jorge. But we moved to New York around the same time in '91. And he knew Brad through his brother, Mario, who played bass, who was going, I think, up at City College. So there was a time, I don't think I had met Brad, or maybe I met him outside of a club once, but we hadn't played. But anyway, he had a week at the Village Gate, which was a great club in the city back at that time. And he was using Jorge, and he had a different bass player each night. So a bunch of us did it, and I did it one night. We rehearsed. I think we rehearsed. Yeah, pretty sure we rehearsed. But anyway, we played the gig, and it was really fun right away. I don't actually remember like what tunes I don't remember it in depth, but I remember it feeling really comfortable, and that we had fun. And also, like, I think like the next week or a couple of weeks later, I was subbing for Christian McBride with Josh Redman's band with Brad and Brian. And we went to Europe, and so I got to play with Brad some more, like right around the same time. So we kind of got a little nice taste at that moment of what it was like to play with each other. And so we just kind of connected, and it just went on. You know, I mean, it was good timing, because I think soon after that he got a record deal, which meant we did a record, and then we started touring. So it was just kind of the confluence of the timing and a musical connection, a musical empathy of sharing similar ideals about how we wanted to make music together, and what we were looking for, and what our influences were, which were similar, and what we grew up listening to, and classical music and pop music and jazz music, the whole history of jazz music. So it was just the right connection. And I guess its length, its longevity is testament to that. It was like what we felt was true.
Is the relationship, like at that time and now, kind of like in your formative years, when, you know, those older people didn't really talk about what was going on? Or is there a lot of communication about the music verbally?
I think with Brad and Jorge, and then now with Jeff, I think I mean, with Jeff it's different, because we're like, I mean, I've known Brad now 25 years, but I've known Jeff 30 something years. I've known him a really long time. So we grew up listening and playing music, but really there's not so much talking about the mechanics, you know, or, you know, the specifics of what we're doing. There's a lot of talking about other things, you know, but you know, which is, to me, is part of the beautiful thing about music, right? Is that you're playing with human beings, and everything that makes up that music, that personal relationship, is reflected in the music, especially over time. So I think it's more of that. We don't really dissect it. Like, we don't sit around after the gig talking about it, unless something was like really not working, you know? And the other thing about that band is that we really very, very rarely have rehearsed. I mean, just like a handful of times over 25 years. And I think that's really because we've been able to do so many gigs where we can work on material either at sound checks, or, you know, if it's not too hard, we just start doing it on the gig and develop it over the course of a tour. So I guess in those ways, it's kind of old school. You know, we're not really sitting around talking about what's going on stage. You know, we're just we always lucky that we have the next night to kind of work it again if it wasn't happening, you know. And I love that, because I don't know, it's always kind of weird for me to talk too much about what goes on stage. And I think part of my not having had a musical education in school, I have a certain not a fear maybe, but like a certain distaste for getting in the way of the magic of
Mhm.
what happens on the
Yeah,
bandstand.
overanalyzing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
over intellectualizing something that I know is really only partly intellectual.
Yeah.
So I think we all share that. Maybe because, well, Brad went to a music school, but Jeff didn't. So, but even Brad's experience at the new school, I think, was as loose and as homespun as it can get.
Yeah. I just have just a few more questions that I just
No
subjects I
problem. Yeah.
want to touch on.
Yeah.
Again, you're in such a unique position, and you put yourself there, having being professional musician, playing for over 30 years, and playing with Stan Getz, Joe Henderson, Betty Carter, like these different generations, that generation, and then your peers, or well, no, before
Right.
that, then you have like John Schofield,
Right.
Pat Metheny, and Gary Burton, and then you have your peers, like you
Right.
mentioned,
Different generations.
Mark
Yeah.
Turner,
Hmm.
and then even now, even younger, Joey, someone like Joey Alexander.
Sure.
So what? Well, first, I want to talk about your time with Betty Carter. I know it was brief, but
Yeah.
is there some like one thing that you've kind of carried through each of those experiences, or generations of musicians, or something that kind of blends through each
Hmm.
time?
Well, I think in the process of playing with different generations of musicians, we're finding out what it means to be a bass player,
Mm-hmm.
what people are expecting of you as a bass player,
Mm-hmm.
the musicianship that um, that you're supposed to carry with you from gig to gig that will keep you working. And I think that was the big lesson throughout all that is, well, what do we do as a bass player? What do people want?
Mm-hmm.
Why do they hire someone instead of somebody else? Or,
Mm-hmm.
what keeps us active? And, I think that's kind of cross generational, I mean, obviously the vocabulary has changed
Mm-hmm.
a fair amount over these times, but, still, everybody's looking for the bass player to show the form, to play the harmony very clearly,
Mm-hmm.
to make the rhythm help the groove feel better than if you weren't playing. To have a good sound, to play in tune, to show up on time, to whatever, to be cool on the road so you're not a pain in the
Yeah.
ass. It's like stuff like that doesn't really matter which generation you're playing with.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, and this is what I've always loved about the bass too, is that um, I think we're the perfect instrument to show how all music is related. In that, for example, the bass, no matter whether it's classical music, R&B, funk, rock and roll, country and western, jazz, the function is really the same
Mm-hmm.
as the bass player. The vocabulary changes, but
Yeah.
so we can take that with us through cross genre, and everything we learn from another music, we can somehow make it applicable to the music that we're playing in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's definitely true with classical jazz, and it's kind of it's not a crusade, but, as a teacher, I'm always amazed when classical and jazz departments at a university are separated,
Mm-hmm.
which they almost always are,
Yeah.
where you can't really take lessons from the classical teacher, or maybe you can take one a month, but you don't see any of the classical students taking lessons from the jazz
Mm-hmm.
teacher, and it's just so ludicrous, and it's such a disservice to the music and to each genre. I mean, classical music would benefit so much if they knew what jazz musicians were doing,
Mm-hmm.
which I still find in 2020, a large percentage of them don't have any idea what we're doing on stage.
Mm-hmm.
The opposite way, it's a little bit better, I think. I think a lot of jazz musicians listen to classical music and play it at a certain level, where they get a sense of what's going on, at least. But part of the problem to me is the institutions of education are very territorial about this. And
Yeah.
it's maybe a little bit better than it was, but no, it's a funny thing. So I really think as bass players, we're great ambassadors for that.
Yeah.
I think about like Gary Carr playing with Richard Davis, or
Mm-hmm.
Edgar Meyer playing with Christian. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like there's this natural understanding of the connectiveness of
Mhm.
music, and the instrument is really in a great position to showcase that. So why am I talking about that? I guess I was just because I mean cross generational. Like when I'm thinking about playing with Betty Carter, yeah, it was short. I think I maybe did it for 6 months or something, but it was so great.
Mhm.
I have so many great memories of that short period of time. She was amazing
Mm.
as a musician, as a band leader, as a woman. Um, Everything was positive for me playing with her. She would play like extremely slow and extremely fast, and she was so tuned into the rhythm section
Mhm.
about how we were playing and how you couldn't let your guard down for a second. I would have kept on doing. I loved it. I was starting to get other gigs. Maybe I shouldn't have gone. Like thinking back, I probably should have stayed with her longer and got
Mhm.
that experience. But I was starting to do other things, and I couldn't commit to her at that point that she needed a bass
Yeah.
player. So I stopped. But yeah, she was amazing.
Mhm.
Really, I loved playing with her, and it showed me how great it is to play with singers.
Yeah.
And that has continued throughout my whole life. So, but yeah, I think, like playing with this huge generational leap of musicians shows me how similar the job is,
Mm.
even though like harmonically, form wise, metrically, music has gotten much more complex.
Mhm.
Still, as bass players, it's our job to make it sound like it's super easy,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I'm always telling students that, like if you can play a good, clear bass line on a standard 32 bar form, um, you can go to a modern composition where maybe the harmonic movement or the voice leading is not so apparent at first. But
Mhm.
we, as bass players, have to make it sound like it's super clear and super logical
Right.
and super correct,
Yeah.
even if it's not correct. So I think, that's like I'm saying is that the bass's function maintains itself
Mhm.
no matter what.
That's a great point. Yeah. Um, well, speaking of like, what jazz musicians, do and what you're doing on stage, um, I mean, to me, you're such a creative bassist, a musician. Um, I feel weird asking this question because people, want, I, I don't read that much about, bass stuff, but they're always like, what are you thinking about when you play, or are you doing licks and then putting it in your playing? But like for you,
Hmm.
I just hear complete, frontal lobe is clear and you're just going. So like for you when you're playing, what what's your goal? Like what's happening for you?
Right. Well, I mean, this is kind of what I teach too, is that I don't teach soloing,
Hmm.
really. I don't teach a lot of that stuff because for me, it's all about practicing is about getting the technique together to be free on the gig,
Hmm.
to be not hung up on the one's own technical limitations
Yeah.
on the gig as little as possible. So for double bass, it means really knowing the fingerboard really well and feeling free to move it through it no matter
Hmm.
what's coming up. And so everything I practice is kind of geared towards that freedom
Hmm.
that comes from uh, technical practice.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, technique has such a kind of a pejorative uh, connotation now, but to me, it's about clarity and like
Yeah.
how do we bring out the clarity of the instrument, and good technique brings that out.
Hmm.
So for me, it's about getting as much of that together, so that when I go to the gig, my number one concern is listening, hearing everything, and reacting. And then it's this aesthetic of like what I think the music needs,
Hmm.
what I'm perceiving the other musicians might need in the moment from my instrument,
Yeah.
or just the conversations that are constantly going on amongst the band. And I try to, put myself in musical situations where we all agree on that. And so, while there are specific roles that each instrument does really well, the overall role of music, of harmony, melody, and rhythm are constantly being tossed around the band.
Mm-hmm.
In that, with open ears, you're reacting to that conversation, and that to me is everything. Like, I don't want to play with anybody who doesn't feel that way,
Mm-hmm.
because then it's like I think I'd rather play another type of music in a way if that's the situation. So I'm always looking for that, and just to be as reactive and awake in the music as possible. Those are my goals.
Yeah, I totally agree with you too, because technique is a scary word for some people, but without that attained to a certain level, the music's not fun for you because you're struggling to just make it.
You're
right?
struggling. It's taking you out of the moment.
Yeah.
And jazz is really particular in that you don't know what's happening next.
Yeah.
More than any other music. And classical music, we work on our fingerings and we do it as a section or by ourselves. And but jazz, we don't know what's coming next. So our necessity for the need for being as free in the moment as possible is super at a high level for jazz. And that's why I find jazz musicians the greatest musicians. They're just so connected to their instrument and being open to moving as the energy moves on the bandstand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, veering to the right for a second. You make the most beautiful music with your wife, Rebecca Martin.
Oh, thank you.
What does it feel like for you to be able to do that, to kind of share that with your wife?
Yeah, I mean, it's like that. What I'm saying is like that is that it's all about the connection on stage. When you have so much connection, then it's even better. I mean, it's like it doesn't get any better than that. The ability to take that on and off the bandstand, is very fortunate and unique. And I feel I'm very lucky to have that in my life. I mean, unfortunately, we don't do it as much as I'd like. I'd like to be able to play more with her. Her time is very divided. She has another life as a social advocate, and she works in water, with maintaining the health of the Hudson River, which takes her sometimes outside of music. But playing with her, it's an unbelievable, intimate, empathetic, unique scene, especially because typically we do a duo, and that, for me, playing duo with anybody is as intimate as it gets, but particularly with her. We've made records with other people, but a lot of times in the last maybe 5 years, as far as gigs, they've all been duo. So it's a challenge too. As a bass player, it's like, how do we deal with this situation where there's no other harmony instrument, and it's pure melody, and then how do we support the melody the best we can? And all these musical situations to me bring up these decisions that we're always making as bass players. Of we want to have clarity, of course. We strive for clarity, but there's times in music where there's too much clarity, maybe, or there's
it's too clean.
There's a need. There's a need for more air, more surprise, more ambiguity, maybe. So this comes up when people ask about, do I play differently, let's say, with Brad than I do with Fly, with Mark and Jeff, because there's no harmonic instrument, no chordal instrument. And I used to say, well, maybe that I do, but I think the bigger answer for me, it's not what instruments I'm playing with, it's whom I'm playing with.
Yeah.
It's the people and the personalities of the people playing those instruments. So I'll play differently with one piano player than with another piano player. Or if you get a different drummer, it changes everything. So it's not really the instruments.
That's what I wanted to ask you before I forget. You may not do it so often now. Well, nobody is. But how do you approach playing with a new drummer for the first time?
With a new drummer?
Yeah.
Well, like anything, I guess I'm listening really carefully to see how they place the beat, what sound they're getting from their instrument. How they tune their drums. I mean, there's so many minuscule little things that affect it, that I'm just seeing if they're listening. I guess the number one thing I check out with any musician is, are they listening to me?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
because obviously if they're not, then the game's over.
Yeah.
So, um, at this point, I don't really have those situations come up, I guess, where that's a problem. But historically, yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, well, I'll make it through this gig, and then
Yeah.
we'll move on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm listening for the same thing, clarity. The clarity of the beat, clarity of the form. Just how does it feel emotionally? Does the beat kind of match my aesthetic beat of what I think it should be like? And then dynamics. Are they playing to the room? Are they playing to the moment? Are they playing to the particular instrumentation? So yeah, I mean, it's the number one relationship, and I think, it's different for me now than it was 20 years ago, maybe when I was deep in like kind of playing more in the city and playing with a lot more people. Now I kind of play with a lot of the same people that I really love playing with.
Yeah.
So there's a lot less of those kind of new experiences kind of constantly coming at me. So I kind of play a lot with people I feel really comfortable and confident and love playing with. But I think, the similarity with all those drummers are those things I'm talking about: an awareness of sound, of touch, of tuning, of the place of leaving the space for the bass.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just, this time off has been really interesting. I really miss playing with drummers more than anything. And well, not just any drummers, particular drummers. And so I play along with records.
Yeah.
Which is great. I love it. And it kind of keeps my calluses up. And I've been having this like love affair with Connie Kay the last few days of like playing these great there's one, Bags and Train, with him, and it's a great rhythm section with him and Paul Chambers and Hank Jones, and just the way the album is mixed. Paul's way on the left side, and I can really just like play along with it, and it's just a beautiful record. But playing with him, it's like that, the way he left space for the bass and was aware of his sound and the spectrum that he was taking up in the band. And it's kind of an older fashioned beat in a way compared to maybe even others of his era. But very particular. So I'm kind of going to a lot of the records that he is on. It's really been fun. So at least, the thing I always tell students with playing with records is, you get to play with dead people, so it's really, you're never going to get these chances anymore. So at least you get a sense of kind of what it felt like.
I count myself lucky during this time because my husband's a drummer. So it's.
Oh, you're very lucky.
Yeah. So I got a personal beat.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. I mean, this is ideal. It's funny, we've figured out finding what we really miss the most.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I miss that. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I miss that, and I also miss just the camaraderie of playing with the hang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the after the gig, late night. Where are we going to eat?
Right.
Yeah.
We miss that. It's funny,
Yeah.
I mean, there's nice things about not being on the road for sure. I mean, a lot of them, but still we miss that. It's funny.
Okay, I won't take up too much more of your time. I just want to know, so what does Larry Grenadier do for fun other than playing bass?
Well, I mean, like, I like being with my family. I have a 14-year-old son. I love being with him and my wife. One of the things that I've figured out finally, also being the age that I'm at, I think, but also having this time off, is that I got to take care of my body, and feel good in it. So I do. I've been doing hot yoga, and I do that a lot. I do Pilates once a week. So that, I don't know if that's fun. I mean, it's kind of a work, but there's something fun actually about it. It feels good after.
Yeah.
But like being off the road makes you kind of slow down and see, well, where am I at with my body at this point in my life, you know, and it's maybe the busyness of traveling, you kind of can ignore it, you know, even though it's super affects everything. So that's been really interesting for me and fun, you know. I love listening to music still. I love practicing still. I love reading still. So, you know, kind of nerdy things. I mean, the funny thing is that I don't know how to do very many other things, you know. And my wife will testify that, you know, like, you know, we're constantly having to hire people to do anything around the house or and so my parents didn't set me up very well for that. Unfortunately. But I kind of wish I could do some of those things a little bit better. But I kind of still do a lot of the things I did as a kid, you know, as far as listening to music and reading and practicing, you know, those are the things that I still find a lot of joy in. And they also, everything evolves as we age, you know, what we get from it and how we hear music. I mean, I love listening to records that I loved as a kid and still loving them, but hearing so much more. You know, it's a beautiful thing to age with the music.
Well, I think that's all I have, Larry. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I don't want to tap you out.
Well, it's fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time.
Sure, my great pleasure, and I'm glad you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Me too. It's a lot of fun.
Good.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Larry. Continue to be safe and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Katie.
All right. Bye.
Bye.